Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm working on the 1/32nd scale TIE Fighter, part of AMT's Studio Series line. Now, since this is a new kit to the market, I'm kind of starting off without much of a plan. I'm just going to start building today and see how much I can do just kind of in a day-long session here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is start off just with some follow-ups from the last video. And I guess it was a pretty big omission that I did not put this new Studio Series TIE Fighter with the Darth Vader Advanced TIE. That's what they look like together. This is the new Studio Series line TIE Fighter, and this is the Advanced TIE, that classic model kit that came out when A New Hope did, redone by AMT Round 2 a little bit ago with a few improvements. Now, supposedly these are both 1/32nd. Obviously, these are using different measurements because this is much, much bigger. I will say I love the plastic color. It's very close to the color I use on TIE Fighters, which is interesting because the box for this model kit shows the TIE Fighter and all of its art in a very non-blue gray. It's a very warm gray, like it was in A New Hope, but still molded in kind of a TIE Fighter blue gray. Here's the next thing I want to look at, because I did not notice this when I was doing my unboxing, but you guys definitely did. This piece is damaged. And this is something that happens every once in a while in a model kit. You can see that this piece just got squished in. You can see the stress marks behind that piece on the bottom. You can see it's a little bit deformed on top. You can kind of see it right there. And yeah, this is going to take a little bit of boiling water to push that out and let it cool and hopefully get that properly shaped again. All right, now we need to kind of plan out how we're going to light this ship and kind of what we're going to do along those lines. So this is kind of the interior build for the cockpit. I'm going to just call this kind of the egg as I go about my build. So the egg fits together really well. It's two halves and then a floor and a back wall. Now the back wall it kind of bugs me a little bit. Nothing about the model, but the design of the TIE Fighter. And obviously this is not the first time the interior and the exterior of a fictional ship have not matched up. But behind the TIE Fighter pilot's head, anytime you see the TIE Fighter interior on screen, this view screen looks like it's a window. It's always displaying exactly what would be behind the TIE Fighter. And of course, there is no window behind him. This is what's behind him. So it can't be a window, even though the interior set clearly thinks it is. So this is a view screen. You have little control panels on some of these triangular shapes here. And then we have our floor. Now, when it comes to lighting things, we have a clear floor. And that's kind of odd to me, because I really don't think they have clear or lit up floors on the TIE Fighter. But I think it's going to be nice for lighting, because you're going to have light coming in the front, light from the top. And if we do put some LEDs just to provide some ambient lighting cast up into the cockpit, we'll be able to see inside. And that's a hard thing to do on TIE Fighters. Now, what I might do is, when I have some ambient light coming up, I might do some clear red just on these outside corners to provide some red light coming up on the sides of the TIE Fighter, because the interiors are very black with red consoles. So if I can shoot up some red light into the cockpit, I think that'll provide a good look and match what the interior set looked like. Now, other things we might want to light, and this is another thing that's a little odd to me, although honestly, on any of the TIE Fighter studio models, I don't know if any of these parts were lit up, but we've got clear parts to light these outside thrusters, these maneuvering thrusters. No clear parts to actually light the main twin ion engines here. So not a big deal. Like I said, I don't think any of these are really lit in shots in the movie. I'll double check and see if these little things are, but those should be pretty easy to light. The other thing that we want to light are these cannons underneath the main cockpit, these kind of blasters. So the egg fits in to the front half, and you can kind of see these slots and these tabs. So you can't really put it together wrong. It fits in just like that. And we've got long clear parts. They're going to fit into these holes down here. And you can see we will have quite a bit of room to put 3mm LEDs behind each of those clear parts. Now if we pull this out and line it up against the back part of the ship, you can see there is the hole for our clear part. We want to be able to get an LED in there. And yep, shouldn't be a problem. Plenty of room there just to snake one in right beside it. But yeah, we are going to try to use 4 LEDs to light up those cannons, those thrusters, and put some ambient light up into the cockpit from the clear floor. So I don't think I've had to do this on a model kit in years. I think I had some aftermarket resin pieces for Nemesis version of the USS Enterprise E that were warped, and I had to use some hot water to straighten them. But it does happen sometimes on a commercial model kit, so just something you have to kind of work with. Okay, oh yeah, definitely softer. Able to bend that up to where it should be. Okay. All right, I may have to apologize for any noise going on now because there is a major heat wave. The air conditioner, it has to kind of be running, so it kind of makes it a little bit noisy for us. What do you think? I think that's a lot better. I think we're much more in shape than we were. I should have done some real close-up photos so that we could tell for sure. Still some stress marks from where we started off, but I think we've got that in much better shape. So I think I've come up with a plan that should allow for minimal masking and super easy painting of the TIE Fighter wings. You know, I was very excited that these came in separate pieces and were separate from the frames, so you wouldn't have to do nearly as much masking as you do sometimes on TIE Fighters. So I'm going to kind of work my way through my plan to paint the sails and then put the frames on top of them. The only kind of compromise I'm making is I'm putting these hubs onto the panels to hold everything together, and I'm securing all of this first. So I will just have to mask the hub and paint the hub separate, but I won't have to do any intricate masking for the frame against the panels. Now, one thing that I do think is a little neat about the way this is done is if you want to do some sort of modification, like the TIE Fighters that only have part of their wings, this would be a very easy one to do that with. The other thing is, I think if you wanted to kind of scratch build some stuff up and do like a Moff Gideon TIE Fighter from the end of season 1 of The Mandalorian, where his wings fold, I think that these parts would do that pretty well. Because you've got your top half, you've got your bottom half. You could build these with the outer framework and these frame pieces to hold it all together. And then you could do something where you would have it like fold in and out for a landed mode. All right, so I've decided I'm gonna start attaching the sails to my hub to start things off. And what I've found is they're not gonna really hold their shape until I have all the sails on and I can sandwich all of them between the panels. So we're gonna do that pretty quickly here. Just gonna be putting each panel on and putting a liberal amount of glue on each post. Of course, I've laid all of them out the way they're going to go on the model so that it's not, so that while I'm gluing, I don't need to worry about which one goes where. And like I say, I just want some glue on all of these posts, and I'm not expecting it to hold its shape until I've got the other half of the hub on. And luckily my glue gives me a little bit of time when I can work here. And then I just want to make sure I have some glue in each of these holes. All right, really squeezing those two hubs together. The centers are going to be held very tightly. And I'm going to keep applying pressure for probably about 2 to 3 minutes, just so I know it's good. And I'll just look down the sides here to make sure there's no gaps. I'm not concerned about the outer edges right now. I'm just concerned about everything at that hub being nice and straight. All right, so now with the hubs fully secured to the sails, I'm going to make sure each sail is connected to each other in a nice even fashion. I'm going to use a clamp to make sure they're lined up well. And now I'll just one by one go across each seam with a fair amount of glue. All right, I'm kind of going down a rabbit's hole here and I'm losing a little bit of my mind, but I'm beginning to think I don't actually know some of the parts of the TIE Fighter. This is the way I see it in my head, the way it is on this 1997 TIE Fighter, where there's maneuvering thrusters here and then a bigger engine pieces here. I'm beginning to learn this is not right. So my misconceptions that these are just maneuvering thrusters and we should have a bigger lit engine here is wrong. This, I don't believe, is an engine now that I've been really kind of digging into this, and these are our two engines. So having these two be clear parts and not having this be a clear part makes sense. Except it's turning out what should be here is just a blank kind of featureless part, kind of just like this, because this is supposed to be the rear window for the cockpit. Now, it still doesn't line up. It's kind of more above their heads on the interior. But at least here, I can see that the producers tried to put in a rear view screen. It just ended up a little bit wrong on the interior. But it's beginning to seem like this should not be an engine. This should be a blank space like it is in this drawing. So hopefully on this TIE Fighter, that will be right, even though I just learned that was right just now. From my internet sleuthing, it seems like the Mandalorian might have reference shots. I think they just told me season 2, episode 8 will actually show this as a rear window, and they say you can actually see the red cockpit lighting and part of the cockpit through this rear window in the Mandalorian. So no matter what I just said a moment ago, these should be our engines. This should not be an engine, which means this is wrong. And this should be a view screen. So where I was just saying that the interior doesn't match the exterior, it's not as far off as I thought it was a moment ago. Although we still have no explanation for why Darth Vader would have a rear window on the back of his TIE Fighter when absolutely no way there's a rear window hidden on here. And a lot of this confusion comes from the fact that, you know what was here on the studio models? A mounting rod. This was the mounting point. So if you see behind the scenes pictures, you just see a big rod going in right here. That's why the detail for what should be here is a little bit of a mystery. And it seems now to me, I'm really thinking this was meant to be the rear window that matches up with the interior of the cockpit. But that clearly didn't stop somebody years ago from turning it into a big engine on the back of the TIE Fighter, which is what it's always been in my head. So I've moved on to painting all the little frame parts that go around the wings. And I'm not sure that this is easier than just building it and masking off the sails and painting it there. I'm not sure there's much that explains the scale of this ship, except for having to try and paint it. There's 24 little framework parts here, and they're big. I mean, compare them to the size of my hand, compare them to the size of a 1/1000 scale USS Enterprise. This is going to be a big model. Now for my paint, I'm actually going more gray rather than blue-gray like I usually do on TIE fighters. I figured if this is for A New Hope, I'll go A New Hope. And I'll do more gray with a little bit of tan rather than the blue-gray. So this is sky gray, lightened up a little bit, and still with just a touch of blue. So I took my normal TIE Fighter blue and kind of mixed it with this sky gray. And I think I've got a color that will look pretty good. All right, so it was about time to put a little bit of paint on the interior. So I just did a base coat on the inside of that cockpit in a nice gray color. Did the chair, different color gray for the floor, the chair, and the back walls. Looking at the floor on that clear piece, it's a little hard to tell, but I taped it off and I sprayed a clear red on the bottom under kind of these outside parts. If I catch the light right, you can kind of see it's different. Then on top, I did black, then my hull color, and now I'm scraping off that base coat to reveal the clear red. All right, so here's what the floor looks like right now. So a little bit of clear red, just some clear openings, and that's our floor. So this is something I did on my Darth Vader Advanced TIE, and I really liked it. So I've taken my pilot figure, I've painted it in some very contrasting colors. So silver and black, a little bit of red for the eyes. And I'm going to cover the entire thing with smoke. All right, here's how we look after our first pass, and let's go ahead and do our second. All right, here is our TIE Fighter pilot behind his controls. And you see there's some pretty cool little controls there for him to be holding on to. You can see we've got the floor, kind of some of those areas opened up. Let's put the other walls around this cockpit and see what it looks like. Okay. And now let's add a little bit of light up from the bottom. All right, I like it. I like just a little bit of the red cast I get with that clear red. Whenever you see these TIE Fighter pilots in here, they really do have a little bit of red light in the cockpit. So I don't know if I have enough. So I think I might open up a few more, and I'll continue kind of the clear red just to give a little bit more red throughout the cockpit. But I like it. It's kind of dark and ominous the way it should be. And I think our TIE Fighter pilot is going to look pretty good in there. Still need to get some of those little geometric shapes painted, have to get some decals on the wall, but I think we've got a working plan for our cockpit. And that's going to bring us back to our wings, which are now painted black. The central hub has been painted in our TIE Fighter color, and now it's time to start putting on some of the frames. All right, now you really have to make sure everything is fitting very tightly. And when you do, the frames that have posts are going to stick out just a little bit on the other side. And since I left the back of my pieces unpainted, I should be able to add just a drop of glue to each of these holes and connect it to those posts. All right, the fit is tight. I'm going to trust that glue to do its job, and I'm going to go around and keep doing it to the rest of the TIE Fighter. All right, the last part to finish up the TIE Fighter is to add these last frame pieces around the outside of these wings. Well, it's about the end of the day, and it's been a pretty fun one. You know, it's kind of nice to just grab a model and not really have much of a plan when you start off and just start tinkering with it. I think this model kit's a winner. This cockpit looks great. The pilot looks great. The decals look nice. And I think lighting it from the ground up and adding a little bit of red is going to be kind of cool. I'll have to play with it a little bit when I get the LEDs in, but just having kind of some of that red light really makes it look a lot more like the TIE Fighter cockpit did on those studio sets. So I think that's going to be a good way to go. Of course, one last look at our pilots, our consoles. See, without kind of the red lighting, those consoles and displays just stand out a bit too much. It's a bit too jarring. But once we have kind of that red light in there, everything looks just a little bit more even and better. A very good, nice looking pilot. And our completed wing was a pretty fun build. Tons of great detail. That'll look a little bit better, and you'll be able to see a little bit more of the detail when we get this model finished up. But a very fun, interesting build to do throughout the day. And I think it looks great. I love it. I think, let's see if we can get in on any of that detail there. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of a wash just to bring out these details when we get to the end of the build. But there is our massive, well, you can see this is a foot by a foot. This is about 13 inches tall. And once more, here's Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. And supposedly these guys are in the same scale. Probably not. This could be a landing pad for Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. So I, so far, like the pilot. I love the cockpit. I love building these wings. The size is massive. It's going to be a wonderful display. I don't know if I'll put this on a shelf. This might hang from the ceiling in a corner. But it's a very fun build. And I think now I've got a plan of action to put some LEDs in and close the cockpit and the ship up. And then we'll paint the outside. I very much like my choice of color. And as I keep saying, I like blue a little bit more, but this kind of straight gray is growing on me a little bit. So the next video on the TIE Fighter will probably be the only other one I'll do, since I'll be able to finish up the ship. Other than that, stay tuned to the channel, because we're going to do a lot of videos about the Kronos 1, the 1/350th scale for Star Trek.